Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Lebanese Biodiversity Podcast. My name is Mira, and I am an entomologist. Today is actually the second episode, but in English. So, my guest will be the same as last week's, Dr. Nabil Nemer. Dr. Nabil is an entomologist, an agricultural engineer, and a university professor. And we will be talking about the insect diversity in Lebanon. There is a lot to cover on this episode, so I hope you enjoy it. Tell us what you think, and see you on the next one. Dr. Nabil, hello.
Hello,
How are you?
fine, and you?
I'm
Thank-
fine, thank you. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so as you have said, so I am an entomologist with a very deep passion for studying insect and their interaction in their natural ecosystem and their agricultural ecosystem and also their forest ecosystems. So basically, I started as I did my BS degree in agriculture. Then I did my master degree in entomology, and later on I pursued a PhD in forest entomology and basically in insect ecology or insect chemical ecology. And I worked basically on two at the time of my PhD at two new insects that were attacking the cedars forest in Lebanon.
Okay, thank you very much. So today we will be talking about the insect fauna of Lebanon, basically. And can you tell us why you chose to study insects? Did you start getting interested in insects as a child, or is it something that started later in life?
No, in fact, I always was dreaming about studying insect when I was a very little child. So it started when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, maybe. I was always looking at ants or at butterflies and catching them, and then putting them in some cages and see how they interact, how they feed, how etc. And then when I wanted to join the university after my high school studies. So it was to look at a major that where I can study insects. So and in fact, they told me that the agricultural diploma is the best to where you can be in touch with insects. So this is how I did my agriculture, but my aim was always to study insect. So this is why then I did a master degree in entomology and then I did a PhD in entomology. So this is how it started, in fact. So it has been always my child dream or my child what we call aim to work with insect, and luckily I could do this later on.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you started working on insects from the get-go. So since once you started university, or even before you started university, but professionally, when you started university, you already had monitoring projects on insects. Did you already have ongoing projects in Lebanon at the time?
Yeah, in fact, when I did my agriculture, I finished my agriculture degree. And then directly when I started my MS degree in entomology, I started doing some monitoring project. And mainly I was working on the pine forest in Lebanon. So this is like between 1996 until 1998. In fact, it was like a long time ago. I was still in my early 20s back then. So this is how I started my field work in entomology. And from then, in fact, I didn't stop until now the field work of entomology. And I do like to work mainly in the forest ecosystem rather than agriculture ecosystem because we have a much more diversity than in agricultural ecosystem where they are still using heavily the chemical pesticides.
Okay, so what you are doing currently is more focused on forest ecosystems.
Mm,
Um,
Yes, but because I teach also at university, so I do have some project also related mainly to alternative methods for agricultural pests, like using biocontrol agent. But
Okay.
my my main work is working or doing assessment of insects in forest ecosystem, mainly nature reserve, and I'm extending this also not only to the forest ecosystem, but also to some coastal nature reserves in Lebanon, so that we do have at least a checklist of what we have in Lebanon as species.
Okay, so can you give us a bit more details about the projects that you are working on right now? You mentioned, for example, monitoring insects in natural reserves. I suppose as a first step to have an idea of the diversity.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit more details about this?
In fact, this project started like now 2 years ago. It is a project which is Stepping for Nature. It is a UNDP executing project, and this project basically it aims at having for each of the 18 nature reserves in Lebanon at least a basic data about or a checklist about what they have as insect during this 1 year or 1.5 year survey. It is nothing because this has to be repeated, and it is not a holistic survey. So it is more a survey which where we can at least gather or get the insects that we see when we are walking inside a nature reserve, whether a coastal, whether a mountain, whether a forest, etc. So whether a wetland, etc. So this is mainly the target of this project. And by this, in fact, we hope, and I hope also that we can get more projects that will deal with the insect diversity in Lebanon. Because, as you know, to get a project about only insect, it is very difficult
Yes.
in so this is why it is we have to have a project within another project that deal with biodiversity at its larger what we call a scope where all other animals are included, birds, mammals, or reptiles, and also we look at the flora, and this is how we can integrate insect in them. Else, people, whether from Lebanon or from the higher authorities in Lebanon, they look more at insect like only, for example, if they are damaging insect or not, but they do not look at the biodiversity of insects, though the number of insects is much more than any other element of biodiversity on Earth and in Lebanon also.
Okay.
So I think
So
will lead us to the question how many insects we have in Lebanon.
yes, yes.
Yes.
But like if I just go back to what you were just explaining, if I understand correctly, these projects, which are not enough to be able
Yeah.
to have a full understanding of the diversity of insects in Lebanon, are just a stepping stone to be able to move further. And it is necessary to combine several projects and several budgets to be able to properly study insects.
Yes, indeed. Else, you have to work by your own, and it is never, and it will be a never-ending project because
Yes.
it's very difficult in Lebanon, especially that some areas are restricted and you cannot go alone, and you have to have all these permits to be in this area. Although these areas are very much vulnerable and as ecosystem, and we need to know what are the insect and what are other animals mainly that are present there also. So it is a very headache in Lebanon to work, but at least in fact we should work because we need to have at least, even though it will be a preliminary, but we need to have a preliminary checklist of what we have as insect in the different orders, in the different families of insect, or in some major groups of insect. Yani, whether these insects are predators, whether these insects are parasites, or whether these insects are important pollinators, or whether these insects are important scavengers. So we need to know what we have, and this is the aim, in fact. We hope that we will build this at the end. Maybe it will take another 10 years, but at least we are on the track.
Yes, we are on the right track. And so I delayed the question, but this inevitably brings us to, you have been studying this for a while. What can you tell us about the number of insect species in Lebanon and about the diversity of the insect fauna?
When I first started to study insect in Lebanon, I will tell you. So the report that we have in Lebanon, it was released like in 1995. So when I just finished my BS degree, and the report of insects in Lebanon was 800 something insects. So I
That
said,
is
no,
nothing.
yes, it is not.
Yes.
So, in fact, but this is what was released, and this was official, in fact, and that these are the insect species that are present in Lebanon. And if we look at for example, the flora, it is like maybe 2,600, and we are not putting all types of flora, just the terrestrial one. Uh, and I think this is because as entomologists, we know that at least, for example, for a flower, we need to multiply a flower, we need to multiply by a minimum of 20 times the number of insects. So if we have 2,000, we should have at least, for example, we need to multiply this number, but at least by at least 20 times. Sometimes it is less, sometimes it is more. It depends on the tree, it depends on the flora itself. So, and since then, in fact, I have been helping or involved in doing some checklist, either with entomologists coming from Europe or other countries. And recently, in fact, I did this gathering of all these data to see how many species so far have been reported in Lebanon. And the number is slightly above 2,500 now, about insects that have been reported in Lebanon in the different family. And this, I think also it is not the reality, but this is what I have found in the literature of all the different checklists that have been until now released in Lebanon about the different group of insects. So
So
I
do you
think that,
think,
yes.
yes, sorry,
What?
go on.
No, I think that this number, and also it is a very, very, very low number, in fact, and it doesn't reflect the real number of species in Lebanon, of insects at least. And I think that we should, يعني, in the next at least 10 years, we should at least have 15 or 20,000 insect at least we know their name, and still this will not be, it will be the lowest, like we call the lowest margin in the number of insects that are present in Lebanon. Maybe it will go to 40,000, I don't know, but at least we should have between 15 or 20,000 of insect of different insect species in Lebanon. This is the minimum, in fact.
Okay, yes, this was my question, which is basically how much do you think we have estimated until now, but we are not even at the quarter.
Yeah, yes, we are still 2000 from all the literature I gathered. I can count between 2000, slightly more than 2,500 insects.
Okay, so jumping on to the next point, Lebanon seems to have a lot of diversity. How diverse is Lebanon compared to other countries? Because we keep hearing the term biodiversity hotspot. How true is this for insects?
In fact, it is true because of the list that we have, for example, released during the last 4 or 5 years. For example, if I take the group of Cerambycid in Lebanon, so far we have around 154 species of Cerambycidae, which are these longhorn beetle. And if we
Okay.
take, for France, or if we take Sweden, etc., so all these area, or France, for example, or Sweden, they do not reach but 140 species. So if we compare Lebanon, which is a very small country, and we have this high number compared, for example, to another European country, so this denotes that where what we call the species richness is very much higher than, for example, another country in Europe. So this
Okay.
is for a simple family, and I think the same apply for pollinators and etc., where we do have, in fact, if we compare the number of species that we can have for a group, it is very much higher per meter square or per area. It is very much higher than other country in the vicinity and maybe in the world also.
So if I go back to one of your earlier points, which is now working on protected areas or natural reserves, what can these protected areas have as role in the protection of the native insect fauna?
In fact, they do have a very much important role. Why? In fact, because these, at least, they are protected area, so they have what we call a, a high status of protection, which is the law. So there is a law that protects the area, and this is very important because if we something happen, in fact, because Lebanon is a very unsecure country, so anything can happen. So at least, in fact, in this area, if we try to concentrate our work, we will get much more data about the species, and this is why, in fact, here it is very important to tell, in fact, the nature reserve decision makers that they need, in fact, not only to preserve the flora or the big animals, but also, or the birds, but they need also to protect the insects that are present, at least for a conservation for a conservation mission, so that we know what we have and we know what is the role of these insects in the ecosystem.
Okay, so before we jump into the last section of this talk, there's one last question I would like to ask you about the native insects of Lebanon, which is what is their importance and why is it worth protecting them?
Yes, so why they are important? So because in fact we were speaking about biodiversity. So insect also they contribute significantly also to biodiversity, and also they are considered essential for the resilience of ecosystems. Also, insects they provide many services to ecosystems, like for example pollination, like decomposition, and so they are very crucial for ecosystem health as well as for agriculture. What else? Insects, they do have also a very high scientific value in terms of scientific research because they help us understand evolution, genetics, and ecology. And you know that in Lebanon, in fact, many species, many old species are being discovered in amber, and they are very old species, maybe going back to more than millions of years, and even 100 millions of years before. So all of these are important for to study insect and also to try to conserve also insects.
Okay, and so for the conservation aspect, what can individuals do to help protect them, or how can individuals participate in the conservation of this fauna?
What we can do, in fact, first of all, we need to protect the habitats. And this is the first thing that we need to do because in Lebanon, one of the major threat for insect is the destruction or the habitat loss. Yani, you will wake up one day that you will see a land that is no more a land, and it is being used for a building or another thing. So this is one of the things that we can do. Also, we have to think a lot when using chemical pesticide, because chemical pesticides, they do not only kill the pest, but they kill other natural enemies, and these are insects. Because, as you know, for example, if we take the whole number of insects, and it is we do some calculation, we know that 99.5% of all the species of insect are all beneficial, or they have role in ecosystem, whereas 0.5 or less of these percent of these insects are considered as pests to agriculture or to humans. And even though in some area we need to create habitat, so this is another thing that we can do. So people, for example, they can establish near their houses a garden, for example, whether they are in urban area or whether they are in a rural area, and this will help the conservation of insect, and also uh, what we can do as an individual, and what I propose for people, in fact, is to participate and support, in fact, all conservation initiatives, and also organizations that are focused on insect protection. We have
Okay.
other roles for the government, and for other agencies that also
Yes.
they need, in fact, to do a lot. In fact, like, for example, develop some policies and implement the policies, in fact, that protect these natural habitat, and also have very rigorous what we call implementation, and to restrict harmful practices. Also, they need to work a lot on raising awareness about the importance of insects, and the need for their conservation. Also, one thing that we hope that sometimes we'll get this, that they need to support research, in fact, for especially scientific research for insects and their ecosystem. And also they need to expand, and the area of protection in Lebanon, declare more nature reserves, in fact, to conserve also some critical habitats in Lebanon, because Lebanon is a country where you have a lot of microhabitat, and not all the reserves are covering all these different microhabitat. And also what the government institution and the agencies can do is that because most of the nature reserve, or the protected habitat, or the potential protected habitat, they are lying near areas that are of agricultural activities. So this is why I encourage these government institutions and these agencies or NGOs also to promote sustainable agriculture, and some land use practices, in fact, that support, or that aim for insect protection, or that help keeping the insect biodiversity.
Okay, so one of the main ideas that kept coming back in your advice is basically to protect the habitats for these insects, be
Yes.
it by having less pesticide use or by making sure that these habitats and microhabitats are still functional and still exist.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. And this brings us to the closing section, which is what advice would you give to people who would like to go into entomology, or basically people who would
Yes.
like to study insects?
Yes, one of the main advices that I always do, that for entomologists, if they want to continue in this career, in fact, they need to be a good observer, and they need to work on the field and not staying in their offices or their laboratory. So they need to go in the field, in the mountains, in the area, to see what is happening. So this is why keep yourself curious to know and passionate about studying insect and their interaction with their environment, because this, in fact, will help you a lot, in fact, in knowing what is happening in the insect population, etc. So this also will mean you need to get involved more in field work, and you need also to do some volunteering in some activities, so that you can always gain experience, whether in Lebanon or outside Lebanon. But I propose that you concentrate on Lebanon for your volunteering in insect conservation, because we do have a lot of insects in Lebanon. And also, one advice for the future entomologists is that you need, in fact, and I propose for you, what I am doing now is to use your knowledge, or what you are gaining in knowledge in entomology, for insect conservation, to educate and to raise awareness among the public. So always share your information with the public, and this will lead, in fact, you will be rewarded at the end, by being, for example, if something happened in an insect, you will be always called, or you will be always asked, and this will make things easy for you to work in ecosystem. So, and always, this is one thing that I have done always in my life, and I always, Kamina, what we can do, I advise future entomologists, is that you need to always collaborate with others, other scientists, other taxonomists, other organization, other conservationists also. And this, in fact, will not but make a greater impact of your work.
Okay, well, thank you for this extensive advice. And if I can recap, I would say you will put the accent on being curious, being observant, not being afraid to volunteer or to do internships, especially in Lebanon, because there is a lot of work to be done, and also being open to collaborate, sharing your information, and building a network as you go.
Yes.
Do you have any closing ideas that you would like to give for this talk?
Yes, mainly one thing that remember one thing, that insects are a very important, and they are an integral part of our ecosystem, and their health, the health of the insect, reflects the health of our environment. So if the insects are not in good shape, it means we are also in a bad shape. So this is my closing idea. So this is why you need to concentrate. We need to do a very collective effort to conserve insects.
Thank you very much. I will attempt to put forward some of the main ideas that we discussed in this talk. So basically, Lebanon has a very high insect diversity. They have a key
Yeah.
role in the ecosystem, being in preserving natural habitats or in being very important for our food production systems. Their conservation their conservation matters. Don't hesitate to get involved in their conservation, to be curious and to ask questions. And yeah, I think this is the main takeaway that I have after this talk. And
Yes.
I don't know if you would like to add something to that. Again, I keep asking you the same question.
I don't have anything. Just remember, insects are as much important as any other element in the biodiversity. Not to say they are even more important than any other element of biodiversity. Remember,
Okay.
the insects number on Earth is a number, and you have 18 zeros that follow this number. So you can imagine how big is the number of insects that is present on Earth at any time. So for each human being, you have around 1,200,000,000 insects that are present anytime of the day, any year, any hour, any day. So so any disturbance, in fact, will create a big problem to us, to our environment, but also to the whole ecosystem, or to the whole biosphere where we are living.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this for these closing ideas. I really hope that people who listen to this will be encouraged to go into environmental fields and will not be afraid to go into studying insects if this is something that is interesting to them. And well, I thank you very much for your time, and I thank you for recording this episode with me for the second time because we have already recorded it in Arabic. And
Yes, always
yeah,
a pleasure to
thank you
talk
very
about.
much.
Thank you.
Yes, it was a pleasure as well. And well, thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.